Today on Cryptic Mass Guitar, we take a look at the differences between the Gibson USA Les Paul Standard 50s. This is a limited edition AAA Flame Burst, and the Gibson Custom 1958 Les Paul Standard VOS. That sound sample that you heard right there, that's the only sound sample that you're going to hear in this video. I'm going to be doing a proper comparison at a later date, so keep an eye out on the channel if you actually want to hear some differences between the two. This one is just a talking video, and the first thing I want to talk about is, well, we're looking at some expensive guitars versus more expensive guitars, right? So I need to say that you don't need a custom shop. You don't need a Gibson USA. If you're playing an Epiphone guitar or anything else and you continuously want to reach for that guitar, it inspires you to play, then you're good. You don't need to spend more money. You're not more important as a person or as a player because you've spent more money on the guitar that you have. It's really what inspires you to continuously pick up that guitar. Now we are going to be taking a look at like the spec differences here. But I do have to note, I chose the 1958 as the VOS to go up against the standard 50s because that's really the typical one that it kind of matches, that the USA matches in the custom shop line. We could use the 1957 if you're comparing it to a standard 50s gold top because it's the same specs. Or we could use the 1959 VOS. The thing here is the neck carve on the 1959 is typically a medium C rather than the more baseball bat club style neck. So that's why I chose the 1958 VOS. The 1958 VOS is also my favorite one that I own. So let's start out by talking about the finish. So the finish on the Gibson USA is a high gloss nitrocellulose finish. Finish on the VOS here is a VOS finish, vintage original sheen. That means that the finish here is just a little bit lighter. That kind of helps translate a little more resonance in your body. Not really tonally wise if it's plugged in, but you're gonna feel a little more of the low end in comparison to the high gloss here. Because it is still a nitro gloss, that means it will still retain some of the presence that's known for, when you're playing a high gloss guitar. Next up, we'll take a look at the body. So the wood that's used here on the back on the Gibson USA is typically a two-piece mahogany back. It's a little bit of a heavier mahogany. The Gibson Custom is a single piece of lightweight mahogany. So that means that there's no glue holding both of the parts of the guitar together on the back. Both of these also have two-piece maple carved tops. So that means both of those pieces are glued together and they're glued to the mahogany body. Neither of these are weight relieved. When you're taking a look at the weights between the guitars, the USA, because it's a heavier stock of mahogany, is ever so slightly heavier. It's not that big of a deal. It's a little bit noticeable. If you're going to be standing up with it for like 4 hours, you'll notice the USA a little more than you notice the VOS, but not by much. Both also have one-piece mahogany necks. They both have the 50s carve. Now, it really depends. You're either going to look at it being called Chunky C, a 50s fat neck, or a 50s neck carve, or a club style neck. The USA's neck is ever so slightly thinner than the thicker club style neck on the 58, 57. It's sort of like it's in between the 58 and the 59, but like by millimeters. I have a 56 that is way thicker, and that really does show when people call them baseball necks. It's like a baseball neck. Both also have rosewood fretboards with the trapezoid inlays. The inlays are different on the Gibson Custom Shop as they're cellulose acetate. So we're looking at, the Custom Shop tours, they say that they're highly flammable, before they're on the guitar. So hopefully they won't, catch on fire on you. They're also both bound with the fret nibs. However, the binding on the the Custom is a little bit thinner than the binding on the USA, and the fret nibs on the Custom are a little bit thinner because of that. That really only means that the fretboard on the Gibson Custom is rounded a little more than on the Gibson USA. Looking at the front of the headstock, both of these have the inlaid Gibson logo. Again, different inlays. And the Les Paul model logo here is silk screened on the front of the headstock, and it's a little higher on the Custom Shop versus on the USA. Now, what does that mean? Well, absolutely nothing. On the back of the headstock is where you will find the tuners. So the tuners on the Gibson USA are the Gibson Vintage Deluxe Clouson style tuners. They are modern sizing. That means if you wanted to swap these out for like modern size tuners like Grovers or like locking tuners, you don't have to remount the holes to make them bigger, because really on the Clouson Vintage Deluxe tuners, the premium tuners that are on the Custom Shops, the holes are smaller. That means if you wanted to swap these out for locking tuners, you would have to get vintage sizing, or you would have to widen the holes on your headstocks. You'd have to, remount the wood to actually get the modern sizing. Both of the guitars also have the CTS audio taper potentiometers. However, when you take the control cavity cover off on the back and take a look on the inside, the Gibson USA has orange drop capacitors versus the capacitors on the 1958 here, which are the paper and oil capacitors. A lot of people call them bumblebees. Some people call them black beauties, although black beauties are a little different. Those are on like the 61 SG, Les Paul SG. Now I've put the guitars down here to talk about capacitors because there's some misunderstanding generally when it comes to capacitors. About 95% of guitar players do not use them, will not use them. Capacitors don't properly enter the signal until you start dialing back on your tone. Not the volume, the tone. Once you start dialing back on your tone, then the capacitor properly becomes a part of the signal. So if you're playing it like, again, 95% of guitar players, on 10, then the capacitor never really comes into play. The capacitors are also one of the factors that play into things in the price difference. So if you look at orange drop capacitors, I'm in Canada, so they're $6 per capacitor, roughly. When it comes to the paper and oil capacitors, wow, does the price vary. The capacitors themselves can run anywhere from like $100 to $300 per capacitor. It really varies on what time you look, where you look, if you know a guy, if it's in a back alley, that kind of thing. So when you're looking at some of the price differences, capacitors really play a part. Next up, we'll take a look at the pickups. So the Gibson USA has a Burstbucker 1 in the neck, Burstbucker 2 in the bridge. These are Alnico 2 pickups. The Gibson Custom has the Custom Bucker pickups. So these are unpotted Alnico 3 pickups. And to be honest, from what a lot of people say, because I've never played a proper patent applied for pickup, they are basically the most accurate reissue that Gibson has had. Some people say the secret is the Alnico 3 with the unpotted. However, it's really hard to say. If most people haven't played PAF pickups and they just have a sound in their mind and they play it and they think it sounds good. So like, hey, they sound exactly like PAFs. It's kind of like JCM 800s. Most people in their head know what a JCM 800 sounds like until you actually play it and you're like, what's going on here? It's still awesome, but it's different. Then we take a look at the bridges. Both of these have the 2 pneumatics with a stop bar. However, the ABR1 on the standard 50s is connected to the body via what I like to call a metal dowling system. So it's not drilled directly into the body. There's like a hole that's put in there, and then there's like a metal dowel that's put in, that's glued in, and then it screws into the metal doweling system. On the custom shop, the ABR1 is drilled directly into the wood on the body. Gives it a better connection, I would say. Again, I haven't done a whole bunch of testing, but that's how it's connected to the body. Now, as far as maple tops, because when you're looking at the standard 50s, traditionally, unless you're trying to emulate a 59, you're going to be looking at something that doesn't really have flame, like a plain top, or just a little bit of flame. It kind of varied on what wood they had. They didn't really take a lot of stock in flame until like 1959. So that's why on this, you're seeing a plain top, which I don't know if you want to, I don't know how to, is it a blister? There's some thing here in the finish, but it's a plain top. The 1950s, typically, like the standard 50s, you're generally gonna see like a triple or a double A flame top on it. This was a limited edition with a triple A flame, and up until I got my 59 and 60, I thought this was the greatest flame in the world. Actually, until I got, I have a standard plus from 2014 that has a quadruple A. That is the smallest and tightest flame I've ever seen on a guitar. So, but up until that point, I thought this was the greatest flame. You can get a 1958 that has a flame top on it. Not usually like crazy, but very noticeable. But it varies, and most times it's just a plain top. All right, so those are the typical differences spec-wise that you're going to see. Again, this is not a sound comparison video or anything like that. I'll do that at a later date. I'll probably do it with all the different 50s models that I have, except for the 56, because that has P90s in it. Now, one thing I want to talk about, and I have to preface this by saying, I don't know about this. This is something that I heard about when I was younger, heard about again in like 2013-ish, and then, once I actually played a reissue custom shop, my mind was blown, and I tend to believe it, but I haven't played a reissue that doesn't have this and compared it to a reissue that has it. So take this with a grain of salt. There's a lot of different stuff that's online where people say absolutely. Most people say absolutely, it does make a difference, whereas some people say it's a conspiracy theory, it's snake oil. I grew up thinking it's snake oil. Let's talk about the glue, right? The glue, because that's the most important part. But the Gibson USA, with its 2-piece mahogany back, 2-piece maple top, its rosewood fretboard on its mahogany neck, that's all connected using tight bond glue. So tight bond glue typically does leave a little bit of film. Not inside the wood. I can't really, you know what I mean. So all of those pieces have glue to them, and there's a little bit of film that's left behind on it. The Gibson Custom Shop uses hot hide glue. When I was younger, my music store that I went to had a sandwich shop in it. And there was always like these old guys that were in their sandwiches and their soup and whatever. and they'd be talking about guitars. And I used to think they're talking guitar conspiracy theories because I thought they were absolutely nuts, but they're very interesting. So they used to talk about things like how to properly tune your guitar. You know, don't tune down to pitch. You're an idiot if you do that, because the moment you start bending, it's going to go flat. The neck. A lot of people think it needs to be absolutely flat. You're an idiot if you think that. That's what the old dude said. Because if it's perfectly flat, there's not enough relief, you're probably going to start getting fret buzz around the first or second fret. Most likely right on the first. You need a little bit of a bow in there to negate that. The other thing that they really talked about were, hey, they don't make guitars the way that they used to. And they used to talk about tuners and bridges, the way they were connected, this and that. But one of the things they talk about that I was like, wow, that is random. Why would they talk about that? Would be the glue. And I thought they would call it Hyatt or Animal Hyatt something, because I was 12 and 13 and I was stupid and I didn't know any better. So they used to say things like, you know, even the glue that they used to use, it made the guitar sound a little louder, you felt it a little more, things like that. Thought it was snake oil. Started hearing that again in 2013. I believe because Gibson Custom at that point started like attaching the neck, I think, with hot hide glue. And then in 2019, everything is hot hide glue. So I started hearing that stuff again, and you know, I never really took stock in it because I was scared to play custom shops because they're expensive and I have problems. But once I played the 1958, I was convinced, because I had never played anything that I felt everything it felt like. You feel all the vibrations, everything is connected, and it's a little acoustically louder. It could be other things, but that's what I thought of immediately. Everyone's talking about the hot hide glue. It has to be real. So I don't know, because I haven't done like a made to measure where, you know, I said, hey, make this exact guitar, but no hot hide glue. I'm not going to do that. But you know what I mean? People have done tests, but it's usually with different guitars, different manufacturers. So it's really hard to say, but because I heard it when I was younger, Gibson touts that. However, when they tout that, you got to realize they're trying to sell, you know, or upsell you on a more premium guitar. So of course they have to say that, don't they? Yeah, different things like that. So that is one thing I have to tell you about, but I do have to preface it by saying I don't know. I just know that it's night and day when I play a VOS or a Murphy Lab compared to a Gibson USA. All right, so that's it. That's all I really do want to talk about in, you know, talking about the differences between both guitars. There's nuanced differences as well. Like this uses aniline dye on the back. This does not. The knobs are sourced to be period correct. The pickup rings, they're higher on the 58 than they are on the standard 50s. They're different types, like the plastics that are used in there. There's a lot of differences that you could really go into that would make you an absolute nerd, where I'm like to say that I'm a guitar nerd, but not that nerdy. So there's definitely differences. And when it comes to looking at pricing differences, the nuances on the 1958 are why it's more expensive. So the selected type of mahogany, the fact that it's a one-piece instead of a two-piece, all of those different things. It's harder to use hot hide glue than it is tight bond glue. So that's why there's differences. We could be talking about the cases, because the Lifton cases are more expensive than the other cases. But to be honest, with the case candy and everything like that, when I'm looking to buy one of these guitars, I look at the case, and I look at the guitar sitting in the case and the case candy, and I think, oh, that's really cool. But the moment I get it home, I'll take a picture of it in its case, and then I'll put my case in the case room, and I'm not going to look at the case again. It's there. But the moment you get the guitar, like, the case doesn't really matter. Just as long as you still have it, right? So that's all I do have to say. Again, keep an eye out on the channel for proper comparisons with sound samples and stuff like that between the two. Thanks for watching.